So first up on how to grow peas, you're going to be looking at field selection. So you're going to want a field that hasn't had a pulse for the last couple of years, and you want it to be a clean field, especially perennial weeds. As far as Canada thistle and stuff goes, it should be taken care of the fall before seeding a pulse. Now your pre-burn herbicide selection is going to depend on what you expect to see for weeds. Most of these products will do a pretty good job on wild oats, but some will be better on volunteer canola than others, and some will be better on things like kochia than others. So talk to your agronomist to figure out exactly which product is going to be the best fit for your farm. Now your seeding rate is going to be mostly determined by your seed test, how much mechanical damage you have, what the germination and vigor is, but you're going to want to target that 7 to 8 plants per foot, which is going to work out usually to 160 to 200 pounds. You're going to seed it into the moisture at 1 to 2 inch depth, and you're going to want your soil temperature to be about 5 degrees or warmer. Peas are generally one of the first crops we seed in southern Alberta. And you're really going to want to use a good seed treatment on your pulse crops to reduce seedling mortality, which can be as high as 30% on untreated seed. So pretty much every company has an option for this as far as a fungicide goes. I recommend Cruiser 5FS for the insecticide portion of it. I find that gives the best control on pea leaf weevil. And if Aphanomyces is a problem in your area, use Indigo from New Farm. Now there's an absolute pile of inoculant choices out there between different companies and formulations. We got liquid, peat, and granular products are available, and your choice is going to mostly depend on your management and your equipment that you use for seeding. Liquid can be either applied in furrow through a liquid kit or applied directly onto the seed, but you have to watch your survivability rates when it's applied with a seed treatment. Peat is usually applied as either a powder or a slurry on the seed, and granular is generally placed in a saddle tank on an air drill and placed with the seed in the seed row. I like granular myself. I find it has a little bit more flexibility than the others. Now comes the complicated part, the fertilizer. So if we take a look at our crop nutrient uptake and removal chart, you can see over here on pulses for peas, uptake and removal, you need about 3 pounds of nitrogen per bushel, about 0.83 pounds of phosphate, 2.75 pounds of potash, and 0.25 pounds of sulfur. Now we don't really need the nitrogen because that's what we're inoculating for. So how do we figure out the rest? So now I can take those numbers off the soil test report and plug it into a calculator like this one. So here I've got a target yield in here of 60, organic matter 2.4, and this is typical results I would see on a soil sample for this area. So about 46 pounds of nitrogen, 22 phos, 460 potash, and 180 of sulfur. So down here in peas, you can see we don't need any nitrogen at all, but we do need about 30 pounds of phosphate, and everything else is good. So the peas are a user of sulfur, so this is why I usually recommend a product such as MES 15, MES Z, or 40 Rock as a really good pea product. And if you don't want to be putting rocks through your combine when you're harvesting, then I highly recommend rolling, ideally right after seeding, but it can also be done at the 2 to 3 node stage. And you need to make sure your soil surface is fairly dry so that you don't cause crusting before the peas emerge. As far as pea leaf weevils go, your best bet is going to be to get them handled with a good seed treatment, whether it's something like Cruiser or Stress Shield. Either one will do a pretty good job. But this is what the adult weevils look like. They're pretty small, they're dirt colored, they're very hard to see. The larvae are white, and you'll usually find them in the nodules underneath. This is this feeding damage that you will see usually around the edges of the field. So even with a good seed treatment, you'll quite commonly see some notches before the insecticide takes care of them. But if you're seeing those notches already, the eggs have pretty much already been laid, and then those larvae are going to go in and eat these nodules, and that's going to reduce your yield. So that's where the real economic damage comes from. It's not from the adult beetles doing the feeding, it's from the larvae chewing on the roots.
All right, now here's some of my first emerged peas near Nobleford, and these are just starting to come into herbicide timing. So we got our first node here, second node here, and the third node here has just opened, and the fourth node would be that clamshell leaf that's still folded up inside there. And you can see we've got tendrils and stuff coming out here already. So this would be early herbicide timing for this. Generally herbicide timing for peas is going to be 3 to 6 node stage. So it's a fairly narrow window, like they'll move through it in a week and a half of good weather. So this field I would recommend should be sprayed probably later this week after our weather event we're supposed to be getting tomorrow. And typically you're going to be spraying with something like Viper, which is going to give you both broadleaf and grassy weed control. Or this year there's a new option called Python. Well, I'm just starting to see the very first pea flowers starting to open, so that means it's almost time for fungicide in the peas. I like to wait until there's, you know, kind of first blooms kind of across the field before application, but this year there's the new Miravis Neo from Syngenta, as well as their Elatis, which is another great product. There's probably close to 40 fungicide options for peas that you can use, but those are good options to start with. Checking out some of the peas over by Nobleford, and they are just starting to come down from full bloom. They are still producing flowers, but not as much as they were last week. We have piles and piles of pods are set in here now throughout the canopy. Things are looking really good. We got, you know, some fairly decent sized pods here, 6-7 peas in a pod, which is not too bad. But down on the bottoms, we are starting to see quite a bit more disease, Mycosporalia, Ascochyta. And when a crop is this big and heavy, like this is up to my waist, and we got peas developing like this, there's quite a bit of weight in that canopy. So we need to make sure that stem stays really nice and healthy to keep these peas standing so they don't lodge too bad. So some of these fields, I'm going to be recommending the second application of fungicide, probably something along the lines of Delaro, to really help keep those stems solid and healthy so that we can harvest these without having to pick them up off the ground. Huge difference in this pea field this week. The low spots have kind of prematurely ripened due to root rot, but the rest of these areas here are just ripening due to heat basically. So pods are pretty well developed. These lower pods are starting to rattle down here, and they are brown and hard. A little farther up, we're still kind of green and leathery on some of these very top pods. But the peas inside should be hard, starting to turn yellow, yeah. So pretty much this would be a desiccation timing. Peas don't squish, they just split. Not seeing too much for grass green, just lime green. So this would be a good timing for desiccation, whether you're using heat and glyphosate or a Regulone ion product. Well, here's the pea field down by McGrath that I looked at on Monday, and as you can see, it's come along pretty well. This did get sprayed with Regulone. This was about 2 evenings ago now, so 2 days of Regulone activity on some of these green peas. These is kind of a volunteer variety that's in here, but you can see that burn on the leaves here, so it is definitely working. A couple more days, these plants will be dried right down. Here's that big pea crop down by McGrath getting combined. Sounds like it's averaging about 80 bushels. I was actually hoping for a lot better yield on this, but it looks like they actually ran out of moisture at a critical time in their development. The bottom pods are nice and big and very well developed, but when you get up to the top, these top pods are very small, and a lot of them only have 1 pea. So a lot of these, I think, just ran completely out of moisture at a critical stage of development, because the taps kind of turned off back in June, and we really haven't had any rain since.